One time I went to Denver for 36 hours and I just had my purse.
That's amazing.
Thank you. It fit underwear, fit some face wash, we're good.
No sunscreen?
No, I brought that.
Oh, see,
Or maybe
yeah,
I used my
I
sunscreen.
know.
Yeah.
And I was like, I know you need sunscreen.
I'm picturing that like anything you needed was in your bag, but anything that you needed that wasn't in your bag, you somehow knew how to MacGyver it out of the materials in your bag.
Like you're ripping bed sheets, tying shit together.
I guess they don't need these underwear. They can serve another purpose.
Oh.
I want to know what other purpose underwear serves. Do tell, Evan.
Oh. I'm picturing it like when Michael Scott decides he wants to be like Survivor Man.
Yeah.
And he's just like he's like pulling apart his pants to make like a head thing. I don't know.
Right.
I was thinking like underwear, like a mask, yeah. Like an eye mask, a face mask, a hat. A hat, a brooch, a pterodactyl.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Somewhere in the middle of Arizona, you painted a desert and called it my home. You made
Welcome to Spoiler Piece Theater, the podcast that doesn't give a shit about spoilers. We just want to talk about the movies. My name is Evan Crean. I'm editor for The Independent. I am co-chair of BAFCA and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living.
And I'm Megan Kearns. I'm a freelance writer and film critic, editor of Bitchflix, and a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association.
And joining us this week, because Dave is on Davecation, is longtime friend, frequent guest star, Dede Crimmins.
Woohoo!
Okay. Guest star? Have I been promoted?
You're a star!
Didn't we joke that you're basically the Alec Baldwin of the show or something like that? Because you've been on so many guest spots.
Yes, and I will wear that badge. Yes. Oh, hi, I'm Dede Crimmins. I'm a film critic, now Chicago-based. Where do I write for? I write for Roomwork Magazine, thatshelf.com, which is a Canadian genre site, and I'm a regular contributor to Birth Movies Death.
Woo,
All
that
right.
shelf.
Oh, man. Now I'm going to think that every single time.
Sorry.
Who's that shelf? Who's that shelf?
We could
Sexy
take-
shelf.
Sexy shelf. That's one to take back to your colleagues at the shelf.
We are a sexy shelf.
Anyway, so on this week's show, we've got some movies to talk about.
Yeah, we do.
First, we're going to start out with, because it is, of course, Women in Horror Month, Dede is going to give us some recommendations on some good horror films by and starring women. We're going to be talking about Incitement. We're going to be talking about, is it Hansel and Gretel?
No.
Gretel and Hansel?
Gretel and Hansel.
Yes.
Gretel and Hansel.
Go.
And we will be wrapping, of course, with the Netflix film Horse Girl.
It sounds so made up, doesn't it?
It
Yeah,
does. It sounds
it
like
does.
a fake film.
It sounds like a really shitty high school nickname you gave to somebody.
Oh,
Somebody that got like made fun of. It's like, oh, horse girl over there likes her horses. She loves them so much. Why didn't she marry him?
I thought you were going to say because she looked like a horse.
No,
Like,
I'm not that
that's
kind of
mean.
person.
I know. I was
For
really
me,
surprised, Evan. I was like, woo.
But doesn't it sound like a bad high school nickname? I mean,
100%.
honestly.
100%.
it sounds like an after-school special that BoJack Horseman would have turned down.
Oh, I still have 2 more episodes to go. I know. I binged like 10 episodes and it was a mistake because I felt like I was going to die.
Oh, yeah.
God, that show's so goddamn good, but so heartbreaking. But I digress.
Yes.
Anyway, back to the movies.
Back to the movies. Women in Horror Month. Dede,
Woohoo!
what have you
Yeah.
got for us?
Yeah. So this month is Women in Horror Month, as Evan mentioned, which is just an annual observance celebration. I'm not exactly sure what the word is, but essentially some women got together many years ago and decided that we needed to call some attention to women's work in horror because often it is invisible because people just think like women, horror of all genres, in addition to like, I don't know, I think like melodrama and romantic comedy is a very gendered genre, and often
Mhm.
women are seen as objects, both to be like thrown around and killed, or as just victims. And the fact that there are not only amazing women making amazing horror films, but there's some really amazing feminist horror films out there.
Yes.
It deserves to be called light to. And I like that we take a month every year and just say kind of like, hey, let's actually have conversations about this. Let's have a big Twitter love fest and tag all of your favorite genre critics and horror writers and things like that, and just take a moment to, take a beat and actually recognize the greatness in this community. So
Very
that being
well
said,
said, by the
Thank
way.
you.
Bravo.
Thank you.
Golf
Thank
clap.
you. I'm very passionate about this subject, clearly.
No, I'm actually so glad that you're talking about it, because Women in Horror Month is a lovely celebration, as you said, or observance. I like both. But yeah, but you're just 100% right. So I'm so glad that you're here to talk about your favorites. I can't wait to hear.
Oh, you might be disappointed. So
controversy.
So controversy. So I figured rather than going through this long laundry list of horror films in the past that have been made by women, because they're just like, are you kidding me? Like Near Dark, directed by a woman, like Pet Cemetery, directed by a woman. I like to really, as you know, usually when I'm on the show, I'm very forward thinking about the genre. I love contemporary horror. I love the weirdo stuff that people are doing right now.
Mhm.
And I always like to highlight films that haven't necessarily come out yet, but you should keep an eye out for.
Yes.
So I have 3 recommendations that I just kind of made sure to shout out to people that they should keep an eye out for, that are coming out either soon or, are yet to be announced, but I'm sure will get picked up pretty soon. And you might just scroll past them on Netflix or some other streaming service and be like, oh, I wonder if this is good, because the glut of stuff out there is so intense. But these are good. So one of them is actually The Lodge.
Oh, I cannot wait to see this.
Which is, yeah, it sounds like, so this is coming out in Boston this week, you said?
Yes, this Friday.
Okay, well, I won't spoil it for you two, because I want you two to be able to spoiler piece it on your own later.
Aw.
But
That's so nice. Thanks.
that's my Women in Horror gift month to you. Month gift to you? Yes.
That's a good gift. I'll take it.
A good gift. So The Lodge, which is done by the directors who did Goodnight Mommy, which if you didn't
Hell
see
yeah.
it, was this,
my God, it's so intense.
So messed up. And Goodnight Mommy, my favorite anecdote with Goodnight Mommy is, so at Fantastic Fest every year, there's always a secret screening or two. And it's usually like a big name film paired with a repertoire film. So like one of them will be like Crimson Peak or something, that's that next big genre film that's coming out this year. Like last year it was Suspiria, stuff like that.
Mhm.
Or 2 years ago it was Suspiria. And one year it was Goodnight Mommy, and we all just sat in this completely dark theater, and you literally don't know what's about to start when it starts. And we're watching this film, we're like, what the fuck is this? This is this Austrian thing. I have no idea what's happening. Literally no information about this on the web, no buzz about this whatsoever yet.
Mhm.
And we were horrified. Like, this film gets so dark so quick. Anyway, I'm talking about this, the pair of directors to their previous film is Goodnight Mommy. So Lodge, that's coming out, much more high profile. It's got, is it Riley Keough is the main role?
Yes.
So one of my favorite things is this film joins the director's perfect vision for the atmosphere. You don't quite know what's going on. You don't know quite who to believe. You don't know quite if anyone's going insane, with some cult, not a cult, cult. Like essentially this woman who is a bit of a mystery to the world because it's their dad's new girlfriend, and she's much younger than their mom was. She was basically raised in like a Heaven's Gate like situation.
Creepy.
Yeah, so I'm not going to spoil it too much more for you guys, but it's just like, it's got awful kids, as the first film did, their previous film did, and it is a directing pair, and one of the pair is a woman, and I think that because of that, and because they do have really strong central female characters in their films so far, it's really interesting to see how they craft these women who are not perfect and maybe not the best people to be raising children, but here we are.
But I mean, speaking to Goodnight, because I can't speak obviously to The Lodge yet, but speaking to Goodnight Mommy, I mean, but that's a fascinating piece. And the female character is so intriguing. So yeah, oh my God, I cannot wait to see it. And that Goodnight Mommy has to be it takes a lot to disturb me. And that has to be one of the most disturbing films and endings I've ever seen.
Yeah, it's
which
pretty
is
dark,
great.
pretty creepy.
Yeah, I have to say one of my favorite things, my two favorite experiences of watching Goodnight Mommy are seeing it for the first time and then getting to see it at the Boston Underground Film Festival. And I just watched people watching it. Because like I just like was sitting next to my sister and I was just like, just wait. And like shit starts to go down. I'm like, oh my God, this is awesome. Like people recoiling from the screen physically. Like, oh man, cinema's powerful, guys.
It is. You know, what's funny is I wish I could have seen it at Buff, but I saw it at a press screening and it was an afternoon press screening. So so it was really interesting because there obviously weren't a lot of people there, but still you could hear the audible like cries of people recoiling. It was amazing.
Yes.
Oh, it was great. I loved it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, so I cannot wait for this. Oh, I'm so glad to hear it's good.
I mean, it has Alicia Silverstone. How often do you get to see her in movies? Come on.
I mean,
that's enough to look forward to.
She just did a TV show last year. But you're right.
Yes, I feel like it's been a while since we've seen her on the big screen. Something to look forward to.
Sure. I can't wait to hear you revisit that statement soon. You go on thinking that, Evan. Awesome. Okay, so my next recommendation is a film by another female director. The director's name is Karen. I don't know if it's Gebe or Geb. She's German. Her previous film was called Nothing Bad Can Happen. Did you guys ever see that?
No.
Oh, it's okay. First of all,
but now I want to.
Can tell, the title is totally misleading because a lot of bad things can and do happen.
No.
So Nothing Bad. Yeah, I know. Can you believe it? So Nothing Bad Can Happen was this. It was based on a true story, which was horrifying. This like young man who's just loves God and has total faith in humanity and the beauty of people and their ability to do good in the world. He kind of ends up being taken in by this family and basically tortured to death. But it's a true story, so I don't feel like that's too out of the spoiler range. And this is all spoiler piece. Fuck it.
That's right.
Yeah, and that film came out, I want to say like 7 years ago now. But the messed up part about it is he lives with them and they start, abusing him, and he keeps coming back. Like, it's not like he's trapped at all. Like, he actually leaves a couple times for an extended period of time and returns to this family. And they just inflict such pain and abuse because they really don't see him as a human. And he doesn't survive. And it's just like, the director, Karen, is like able to have such an impressive grasp on a character that is, in my opinion, incredibly unrelatable. Like, I'm not religious. I hightail it out of dates halfway through it, let alone stay with a family that's abusive. Not that that's his fault in the slightest, but you know what I mean? Like,
wait, do you hightail it out of dates if they're religious?
No, I think she just means dates that are going awry.
Oh,
yeah, but
I
you know
like
what I'm
that
saying?
no
So
comment.
Yeah, she has like a very specific tenderness to, the quote unquote victims in her films. And this film, maybe it's not strictly horror, but as someone who never wants to have children, it's kind of horrifying. So this film that I'm talking about that's going to come out soon is called Pelican Blood. And basically it's this woman. I know it does. It's a whole, like, there's a whole like metaphor entwined in it, but you can ignore that. Sorry. So basically it's this film where this woman has a daughter. She trains horses. She kind of has a pretty good life. A lot of her horses are used by police officers, so she has incredibly steady income. And then she decides she's going to adopt another child. She wants another child. This is going to make her life complete. She, again, has no partner, no man, no woman that, is helping her through this. She adopts this little girl who looks cherubic and is adorable. And she's kind of hell on earth. Like, she is abusive towards her older sister. She will not stop screaming. She will not stop throwing things. She will not stop like hitting her mother. And it's kind of turns their pretty good lives into these horrors, and it just turns them upside down. And this is just about the blindness that this mother has towards motherhood and her like undying face to this child who just entered her life at the expense of everything else in her life.
Right.
And the lengths she goes to in order to try and get this to work for her new version of a family does dip its toes into the horror genre. So that's kind of why I threw this in here.
I mean, that sounds pretty horrifying. So
yeah. Sounds like she needs to cut that little shit loose.
Yeah. But like, for me, just hearing something where it's like, mother wants another child, like, that's the beginning of the horror. So
mother wants a child?
I was just going to say mother.
Which is another horror film that I love.
Oh my God, because it's the best.
It is the best. Yeah, so the third film that, again, these are all like female directors or female and male paired directors. And so this one, I want to say I talked about this already. I talked about Dead Dicks when I was on after Fantasia, didn't I?
You did, but talk about it again.
I'm going to talk about it again.
Forgot about the dicks.
That just aired at the Boston Sci-Fi Film Fest.
Yes,
It did, yeah. Yeah, so it did play at the Boston Sci-Fi Fest in Somerville just last week. And it's pretty amazing. It's one of those films you watch it and you're just like, oh, you don't need a big budget in order to do like one of the best films I've seen all year. So this is made by a husband and wife directing team up in Montreal. And essentially the film opens up to this guy killing himself. And you see it with a very unflinching, no edits, straight shot of this guy just killing himself on screen. And as soon as the film starts, and then the second he dies, you see him, the same dude, walk by in front of that body. And it's just kind of like, well, what the fuck is going on here? And basically the film, it does feature dicks. Like you see his dick a lot in it. And I think that's a beautiful thing. So it's not just a clever title.
I'm glad for the warning because I don't want to see them.
Oh, yeah. You're welcome.
You'll get a black bar in that area.
Very Parasite
in your
over
version.
the eyes.
Yeah.
Except it's over the dicks.
Yeah.
Yeah. It'll be like Elvis's hips.
Nice.
But this film is, I mean, as ridiculous as that sounds, like instantly that first scene draws you in, and then you just kind of realize that like this guy has kind of been going through a lot of mental health issues and is kind of staying in his own hovel and he's not leaving, and his sister comes to see him, and then she figures out like, oh wait, this is not our reality. Something is going on in this apartment which makes death not work anymore.
Oh.
And it is wonderful and it's fascinating and it's really creepy and it's just like incredibly unsettling, and it's like one of those speculative fiction like slash horror films where you're just like, my skin is crawling because I have no idea what the fuck to do with this. But then you add on top of that a really sensitive approach to dealing with mental health and dealing with people who isolate themselves and things like that and along those lines, and just the way in which it deals with an actual character who's three-dimensional, who is going through all this, you know, extra normal stuff, but also through his own like human condition and trying to deal with that and struggling with it. It's really amazing.
Sounds good.
It's
Even
amazing
with the dicks.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I mean, I usually try not to judge a film by its title, but when I saw the title I was like, yeah, I have no desire. So I'm so glad that you talked about that because now I'm intrigued.
You should. It's so incredible, and it's one of those things like a lot of like I totally would understand like dead dicks, and it's like, well, there's a lot of death and there's a lot of dicks in it, and there is a good sense of humor about the film. Like it does have a good set of. It does have a good head on its shoulders in terms of not taking things too seriously. But that being said, just like the
Evan
way
has just lost it.
Is it because I said
phrasing, Dede?
Was it because I said head and dick?
Yes.
Excellent. This is so wonderful to be doing this remotely because I can just picture your faces right now. But anyway, it's a wonderful film, and I think that those pair of directors, they've made some really incredible short films together, and now they've made this first feature, and just like I don't know, it's just one of those things where you get kind of excited to see what they're going to do next.
That's a great feeling,
isn't it?
It is.
It's like when you find a restaurant and you're like, oh, I get to keep coming back. This is great.
What else do they have on their delicious sounding menu?
Mm-hmm. But yeah. So, you know, Weather in Horror Month is amazing. There's always good women in horror stuff coming up, like always. Yeah. So I know that there's like often conversations about like big blockbuster stuff and like there's good celebrations throughout the year, but like women are out there making good horror, and it because distribution is a piece of shit.
Mm-hmm.
You have to sometimes go digging for it.
Yep. I was going to say, you took the words right out of my mouth. I was literally just going to say that. So yes, so we should all go see those films
for sure.
Yeah.
I mean,
and especially starting with The Lodge that's coming out soon because that's getting a wide release.
I know. I can't believe it. I'm so excited.
It's real weird.
Good.
Yes.
I'm ready for it.
And there's a long track record on this show of Dede recommending things that we may not get a chance to see for a year or two.
Yes.
I was just actually telling a coworker about that earlier today because I was recommending movies to her that she sometimes takes a little while to see. And I was like, well, I know somebody who can recommend movies years in advance.
One of my favorite spoiler-free episodes is still when Dave finally caught up with the boy, which, speaking of, Brahms 2 is coming out this week, and it
Yes.
did not get press screened.
Nope. But neither did the boy. Neither did the first boy.
No,
Did it?
And
the
I
boy, but
liked it.
I love the boy.
Yeah, I think it's a very underrated film.
Is the subtitle, is it Brahms 2 Electric Boogaloo?
I wish.
Oh my god, I can't.
No, it's the that it doesn't even work. I was gonna say it's the Boya King, like the quickening, but never mind. It doesn't even work. That was a fail.
Oh. Traumatic memories associated with Highlander 2.
I know, that's
Moving
why
on.
I like to keep bringing it up. I like to rub salt in the wound.
Oh my god. Okay, so then I think it's time for me to talk about Incitement,
Yes.
which is opening this week, I believe, at the Kendall. Hopefully it's opening elsewhere, but I actually saw it last week. It was the closing night film of the Boston Israeli Film Festival. And my God, what a closing night film. It is super tense. So just a quick plot summary. This psychological thriller follows Yigal Amir, played by Yehuda Nahari Halevi, in the year leading up to his assassination of Israeli Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. The film examines Amir's world, displaying his evolution from hot-headed political activist to dangerous extremist, a studied eye on the events and the atmosphere that led to one of the most devastating days in Israeli history. Incitement is a cautionary tale to what happens when leaders use politics of violence and hate. It's fucking intense. And it is just, it's a very tense story. And it really puts you in the mind of this guy who starts out as, you know, just like a typical student activist. Like, he is like, well, I guess I wouldn't call him typical, because like the beginning of the film, he's like in the middle of a protest that's kind of turning violent, and he like weasels his way out of getting arrested to go to a different protest on campus. But yeah, it's an interesting glimpse into the mind of someone who goes from being, you know, a protester to someone who decides that he's going to kill the prime minister. Like, it's just like you see this entire evolution. You see the way that like the news and the people around him kind of like condition him and like make him feel like this isn't an okay thing. Like, he has all these like he's Orthodox, and he has very like religious people around him saying like, Rabin's policies and like making peace with the Palestinians is bad, and like they twist religious law to like basically condemn his actions. And you have this guy who takes that very seriously, and he starts, looking at the law and starting to use it and kind of twist it in his own brain to say, okay, this guy's evil. And so like Jewish law is telling me like, I got to take him out. Like, that's the only just cause to this situation. And like, there are people around him who are supportive of him, who are like buddies of his, but they also are kind of like, dude, this is a little bit crazy. But like, there's also a lot of leaders. Like, he kind of goes around like when he's getting ready to actually do it to kind of get like blessings from different rabbis that he talks to, like to really like get, the okay on this. And none of them like says yes, explicitly do this, but they also don't explicitly say no. It's a really weird thing where you're like, holy crap. Like, this is crazy. Like, this is nuts. Like, this is horrible that someone can go from like being like a student and a protester and someone who is politically active to like, that's it. That's the only thing. This has to be done. I have to kill the leader of my country because it's going wrong and there's nothing else to be done about it.
There is one scene that I saw that kind of along those lines. That was so disturbing to watch, was when I believe rabbis, I'm not sure, but the men are sitting around talking and talking about how, if you essentially like rat out someone who's Jewish to the Gentiles, then you can kill them even if there's no death penalty. And I was like, what? Like, it's just the cavalier nature of talking about, killing someone and assassinating them is just I was like, wow, that's
Yeah, and that, I mean, that's exactly the law that he keeps coming back to. And it's just like, there's like a scene later in the movie where he's like looking at this, he's like looking at the religious text and like copying down and like making notes and like reconvincing himself that like this is right. Like this is okay. This is like okay to, and like, I think one of the things that's also challenging about this is, given the fact that he as a person he's a Yemenite Jew, and he, in Israel, like there is racism there amongst Jews, like specifically, like he has a situation where he's dating an Ashkenazi girl, and she comes from very like, like they're just like a very different type of person. Like her family is like living in a settlement, and they just like have such different attitudes he just comes from like more of like a working class kind of background. And so like when he starts expressing some of these like fanatical ideas, like that clearly pushes her away. But like in his mind, he's like, oh, well, she's just being racist. Like she doesn't want to be with me because I'm Yemenite, not because I'm expressing these crazy fanatical ideas. And so like that almost kind of like fuels the fanaticism, is like, okay, well, I can't be with her and everyone looks down on me. And so like, that's just like, add more fuel to the fire about that. And like, it is true. It is a thing. There is racism there, and like it is a problem. But like in this case, it's like this guy is just being fanatical, and he's kind of like, got this like false equivalency that that's what's happening, and it's scary to see that happen.
Wow, that sounds scary.
Yeah,
Terrifying.
I mean, it's really good. It's really tense. Just like an incredible performance by the lead. Yehuda Nahari Halevi, like he is so like, he brings this authenticity to it, I think partially because like he is Yemenite himself. He did grow up in the same area that Yigal Amir is from. Like he's met people in Yigal Amir's family. Like he brings a very just kind of like fierce authenticity to this part. And after the screening at the film festival, he was there and he was just describing like how he became this person. Like he just went very method about it. And I think it very much shows in this performance. Like it is a very intense performance, and it just feels so raw and just like scary. So I look forward to you seeing the rest, Megan, at some point.
Yes.
Because, like, damn.
Yeah, I was already kind of found it off-putting in a good way right from the start. So, yeah, I definitely want to see the rest.
Yeah, no, I think there's also kind of a... I mean, to the summary's point about politicians kind of using hate, I think there's a kind of underlying piece here about Rabin's political opponents and how they really kind of, it's not explicitly stated in the film, but they kind of fuel this frenzy. Like they fuel this anger and this like violent tendency. Like they just keep kind of promoting it, and it's no wonder that things kind of came to a boil in the situation. And I think there's something to be said about that. I mean, it's just as relevant today in our society, our leaders, our political leaders stirring people up into that kind of a frenzy, and it's not good.
Right. And
yeah, like as you're speaking about this, I mean, as someone who hasn't seen this, so I clearly have an opinion to offer. It's not to deprave it of its experience within the culture of the film, but like it sounds like something that could / is happening here now.
Mm-hmm.
Like, and I don't know if the filmmakers make any parallels there, if you brought your own experiences to it, but like as you're describing his relationship with her, like that sounds like the whole like incel, like we're like, oh well, she, when men just kind of fly off the edge at women, and it's like, no, you're kind of an asshole. She's not rejecting men, she's rejecting you. Like
yeah, I definitely,
terrifying.
Yes, you definitely are correct there. Like I think that is absolutely, like, it's definitely a commentary on the time and the political situation of the mid 90s, but it definitely is also relevant to today. And like, it did, repercussions of it, have come through to today. I mean, like the assassination set off a wave of violence and war and bloodshed that continued for a very long time. And I mean, the film, like towards the end, there's kind of like a title card about how, Bibi Netanyahu, he came to power after this. And they talked about how he, in his victory speech, he didn't reference Rabin at all. And so like the fact that he like he seized power in the situation and he came up through the ranks while this was all happening. It's a scary thing to think about too. It's like he kind of seized on this energy and came into power, and like, he's in charge today, right now. And it's so yeah, there's definitely connections to, the modern era.
The more things change, the more they stay the same.
Indeed.
Ugh.
But
That's depressing. But anyway.
onward to, was it Gretel and Hansel?
Yes! Bravo, you got it right.
Well, it's turning my, my understanding of the classic story on its head by changing the order around.
That's right. Putting ladies first.
So you guys both saw that.
Yeah, as we sit in silence, we're clearly really itching to talk about this.
Yeah, I mean, yes. Yeah. So this is direct. I know I'm like stumbling over my words. This is directed by Alice Perkins, and it's the name changes to signify that it's a focus on Gretel rather than the two siblings together, and it's a darker. I mean, I would argue all fairy tales are really dark, actually, but this is arguably a darker retelling of the story.
It's the DC version. It's darker and grittier.
Gag.
Shaking my head.
I know. Shake your fists in anger.
It's Universal's Dark Universe version of
so basically
Gretel and Hansel.
Everything is gray and it's raining and you can't see anything unless it's Wonder Woman or Birds of Prey. Then it's colorful. So in this film, we start off with narration, we end with narration. There's way too much narration. But there's narration about the story about the little girl with the pink, what is it, the cute girl with the pink cap or whatever it is, and it's like a
bonnet.
Yeah, and it's about how this little girl she was given a gift from an enchantress, and basically she's evil, and she makes people kill themselves and horses die, and so she's left
like
out
she
in the
almost
woods.
died in exchange for her life. Her parents
Whoa,
got bad juju. Am I remembering this correctly?
Yeah, no, that's correct. That's correct. Yeah.
So bad juju is not a technical term for it, but they went to kind of like a witch to help her out, and in exchange for being able to live, she was given dark powers.
Yes. And that's
Gretel was given dark powers.
Well,
no, the witch.
This is a story that
This
is a story that Gretel likes to tell. It's her favorite story.
I see.
That she tells.
It's a good old-fashioned prologue with a voiceover.
Oh yes, indeed. Yeah, and so Gretel likes to tell this story to Hansel, and then the two of them are kicked out because their mother can't feed them, and then almost threatens to hack Gretel to pieces with an axe.
That I liked.
All right.
Was that your favorite part?
Might have been. I love a bad mother.
Bad mothers. Yeah, so Gretel and Hansel, get the fuck out of there, and then have to, make their way, and then they come upon a place and are attacked, and this huntsman helps them and tells them to go to this other family, and he gives them directions, and he's like, go there, and then you'll be able to, find work, and, you'll be able to find lodging, and, blah, blah, blah. And so they go on their way, and they're really hungry, and Gretel starts talking to mushrooms to find out if they're healthy to eat, and she's having a whole conversation with mushrooms
before she eats the mushroom.
Correct.
She's talking to mushrooms
to see if they're okay to eat.
And they're like, I swear I'm not the psychedelic kind. Please eat me.
And they were
exactly what they would say.
They are 100% psychedelic. And so they go on their way, and then they find a cabin in the woods, and Hansel says, "It smells like cake. I must have it." And he's like, "It smells like bacon." And yeah, and then
And he's like, actually, we're just tripping balls.
it's just the mushrooms, kid. Calm down. Yeah, and then it's Alice Kriege, who's always delightfully creepy, as an older woman who takes them in and gives them lots of treats and candies and cookies, but as Gretel always says, nothing is given for free. Things are given and taken. And then she starts to have these horrific dreams and things go awry, and she questions that things might not actually be so great. And
and they start finding the house is like super funky where this witch lives in the woods. Oh, sorry, we don't know she's a witch yet.
She's a witch.
She's a witch.
Spoiler
and like
alert.
so as Gretel's helping like with household chores, she kind of finds like trap doors and like cages out and back and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. And the witch
That's
is like,
fun.
I got work right in that cauldron over there.
Yeah. And but at first she's like teaching Hansel how to chop wood, and she's teaching Gretel about, herbalism. And, she's talking about her power as a woman, and, and how she knows she has, the sight and the gift, and, she's kind of nurturing her. And yeah. And then it goes to its logical conclusion that she's eating children.
Of course.
Yeah, I know that's going to come as a huge shock.
I'm shocked.
Yeah,
And
but the
dismayed.
way in which it does it, like it's not like you would think like this like from the fairy tale, like the crotchety old witch ends up like putting Hansel in this cage, feeding him until he gets huge, and then she tries to eat him, and then Gretel saves him. This is like through this weird dream sequence underneath the house where she's young again, and it's like, yeah.
Right, and that I actually dug because I loved that she donned the disguise of an old woman, because older women are perceived as weak and kindly, and they're unassuming, and so that I liked. And yeah, I kind of like this kind of surreal dreamscape feel that everything's happening in, and the visuals are gorgeous. I mean, there's some great shots, there's some great framing. So I like that.
Yeah, it's one of those movies you're watching and you're like, oh, cool, I like Holy Mountain too. Like, so much of the visuals, like, there's triangles, there's like big old black brim hats. Like, a lot of the visuals are, I can only assume, homages to other films that I have in common with the director, because it's pretty obvious.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, and it's funny that is funny that you're kind of talking about not that you said that it's derivative, but kind of that it is playing,
I said it without saying it.
I know. I didn't want to put words in your mouth, but I knew that's what you were saying. But yeah, I mean, I couldn't help but draw comparisons to The Witch, and I'm like, oh, this is like The Witch, but The Witch did this so much better. And
yeah, and like I think this is like one of my favorite things ever that like Dave said on the show that I now say almost daily. Like, subtext shouldn't be text.
Right.
Like, maybe I'm paraphrasing here, but it's just like when you're watching something and you're like, oh, the subtext is about female empowerment and things like that. Like, The Witch does that. And again, like, of course, we're going to make comparisons. The Witch does that in such a way where you watch the next logical conclusion. This is an older woman sitting down with a young woman talking about feminine power, like having that actual conversation.
Right. And even before that, when Gretel's trying to get a job and there's like the creepy older man who's the Lord, and he's like asking her if she's a virgin and if she's
at his brothel.
Yeah.
Again, not subtle.
I just grimaced.
Right, but that's what I mean. Like that, it's just it's like it's about as subtle as like a hammer to the head. Like, it's ridiculous.
Or as I'm fond to say on the show, it's subtle.
It's very subtle. Yeah. I mean, and I think that's the big problem, is that nothing is subtle, nothing is implied, everything is so heavy-handed, from the narration to the visuals to the plot, like the dialogue, everything is just so obvious and heavy-handed, and it's annoying, and to its own detriment.
To its own detriment. I do think, and again, like, this is probably the longest 87-minute film I've seen in quite a while.
Oh, yeah.
Ouch.
Yeah.
Yeah, and like, I don't mean that to be as hard of a burn as it possibly comes across, but like, it just dragged. And then you just kind of realize, you're like, oh, I'm leaving the theater and it's not like 6 hours later. Like, and it's just the whole thing with like the children talking to mushrooms. It's like, because it is loosely hung on the frame of an incredibly well-known fairy tale, it uses that to its advantage in certain ways and actually doesn't need to tell that much storytelling and connect the dots of, because we know that she's going to eat him. We're just kind of waiting for it. And we know that she's fattening them up for a reason. But that being said, it just relies on that so heavily that it doesn't do much in terms of like building up its own story and showing us how it's deviating from that.
Right. I mean, I am kind of a sucker for the whole, women's empowerment conversation. And, there are some lines that are not very original by any means, but are, kind of underscoring and reifying that about how, the king should, when she's teaching them chess, like, oh, the king should be afraid of the queen because she can do whatever she wants. And like, but there are very contradictory, illogical lines like that where it's like, oh, women can do whatever they want, but no, they fucking can't. Hello, patriarchy and sexism. And it's like, and that the film, the witch talks about that within that too, where she's talking about like, oh, you're going to have people in your way. Like, that's why you have to jettison Hansel, because he's going to get in your way. Like, men will, because they'll be afraid of you. And it's like, well, wait a minute, which is it? Can you do whatever you want? Or are you going to be constrained by the patriarchy? Like, it's just, it's just irritating. And it's so irritating in its obviousness. And I think there's the seed of a good idea here. And I wish it had gone
germinated.
Yes, I wish it had germinated and gone deeper and not been so obvious and really played more with the bounds of the story, because Dede, you're 100% right. You don't need to tell everything. You don't need to spell everything out if it's a well-known story, which this absolutely is. But yeah, and I'm also really irritated by the end too, where like she sends Hansel away, because women's power is scary. Like, what the fuck? Like, it's just.
I'm sorry. I'm just all I'm thinking is like, does my vagina scare you?
My vagina dentata, yes.
It should.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree with everything. And the ending itself is just like, I think it thinks it's being super extra clever, and I think that's one of the reasons why it annoyed me as much as it did. Because it's one of those like, and Osgood Perkins has like a history of doing endings where he's like, huh? Do you see how smart I am? I'm like, no, I get it. If you're pointing it out, it's not that smart.
Exactly. You shouldn't have to point it out. Trust your audience.
Trust your audience. And also just like the whole ending where it's like, there's this thing where like the witch has like blackened fingertips, which actually looks super badass.
The again, aesthetics are gorgeous.
Yeah. The aesthetics are absolutely amazing. And all the food like is just simultaneously looks like the most delicious thing you've ever had, but still haunted somehow. Like, it's just the visually, it's really amazing. But anyway, so the witch has like these black fingertips. And at the end of it, when Gretel's like out in the woods and there's like the voiceover over explaining what's happening or what isn't happening, her fingertips kind of turn black right in front of her. And it's like, oh, so okay, I get it, dude. Like, yeah, are we gonna put her in a pointy hat and give her a broom now? Like, we get it.
Yeah.
I would actually go for that entirely.
I actually would too. Yeah, I mean, visually, I really was into this. Like, I love the scene where the witch, when she's young, is in like the basement and she's like chucking internal organs and body parts onto the table, and then she raises her arms so it turns into the food. Like, it's just, yeah, it was a visual treat, but it is just much like the food. It just feels like rotten to the core. Wah, wah. Yeah. So I didn't dislike this by any means, but I just had some issues with it.
Yeah, same.
Yeah, it's unfortunate because it could have been great.
That's the thing. Like we were saying when we first kicked off this conversation, like creepy fairy tale, sign me up.
Right? I'm in. Bad mother, in.
In. Give a bunch of people axes, even more in.
Axes, down with the patriarchy.
Right. In.
Up with woodworking. In.
Women killing men, in. But that's I think what just pisses me off even more is that this could have been so great. I mean, Sophia Lillis is a great actor. Alice Krige is great in this. But yeah, it just loses its way with obviousness. And then all I can think of is the Simpsons line, "The rat stands for obvious." And that just reminded me of this.
Mm-hmm.
I often think of, I call this one Bitey.
Nice.
Well, I think we should move on then to Horse Girl.
Oh,
Because
yes.
I feel like we've effectively warmed up to it between some of this conversation about Gretel and Hansel. It sounds like there's maybe some, I don't know where I'm going with this. Someone save me. Please help me.
You need a lifeline. Phone a friend.
I want to see where you go.
All right. Well, I guess I could start with a plot summary. We could give the official Netflix plot summary on IMDb.
Sure.
Sarah, a socially isolated arts and crafts store employee, finds herself more content in the company of horses and supernatural crime shows than people. But when a series of strangely surreal dreams upend the simplicity of her waking life, Sarah struggles to distinguish her visions from reality. A darkly humorous psychological thriller about a woman's search for the truth, however abstract it may be.
What?
Gotta laugh at that plot summary.
Oh my
Darkly
God.
Okay.
humorous? What part? Were you guys laughing at all during this?
No.
I was not laughing one bit.
No, I did not.
Number one, no. And number two, she's not really isolated.
No.
No.
I
She
mean,
has a
well-
roommate who seems normal. She has a friend, Molly Shannon,
Yeah.
who she works at the store with.
I mean, she kind of isolates herself at times, but I mean, she visits the girl that she used to go horseback riding with. So yeah, I don't think
She
that's
wishes she could go out with her Zumba class instructor.
Oh, I know that's sad.
Yeah.
But yeah, she goes on a date with that guy. But yeah, I don't think isolated is a completely accurate plot summary point.
No. And in this
No.
case, when we say she, we mean Alison Brie.
Correct. Who's playing Sarah? Who also co-wrote the film.
Yeah, no, I think that if she longs to connect with people and doesn't quite know how, but I don't see that as being the same as isolated.
Correct. Right. She's very socially awkward,
Mm-hmm.
but not the same as isolation.
Yeah. I mean, I think she turns down going out sometimes
Mm-hmm.
when she knows it's not going to be a good situation for her. Or, like, if she
Mhm.
feels like there are people that she won't get along with. But I don't think she's like locking herself away.
No.
No, and she's also like very fundamentally uncool, but that's kind of fine because she seems like, I don't know, like she works at a craft store and loves horses. Like
Yeah.
she kind of knows her limits almost, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I mean, and she's super passionate about working in the craft store, and like there's like the
good at
whole
it.
opening is like her describing the merits of different kinds of paints and how they look to a customer. Like she, you can tell that she's good at what she does and she's happy. So of course everything has to go horribly wrong for her.
Has to all unravel.
Yeah. Oh, there was a point maybe about, I don't know if it was exactly halfway through the movie where Sean and I were looking at each other and we were saying like this either needs to be a lot more weird or a lot less weird, because we felt like as we were watching it, it was some type of like weird, but it wasn't going enough in either direction for us as we were watching it. I don't know how you guys were feeling as you were seeing it.
I didn't feel that. I actually liked.
No.
Yeah, I
You
actually
did?
liked the pace and the weird, the level of weird it was diving into. Yeah,
It was putting down.
I feel like
yeah.
Yeah, I felt like there was I appreciated the fact that like the weird tipping point was pretty well defined. Like it's just like, okay, she's maybe a sleepwalker, she's kind of a strange lady, like whatever. And then she starts talking about clones and you're like, "Oh." And I did really appreciate, because there's this one point where she's out on a date with her roommate's boyfriend's roommate.
Yes.
And they're talking and he's just like, "Oh man, aliens," but like clearly his version of like weirdo alien like occult stuff is just like what he gets from the History Channel.
Yeah, and
The ironic
he's
title,
like
History Channel.
joking about it too. He's like, "Isn't it so
Yeah.
crazy?" Ha ha.
Yeah, and like I had a similar thing recently, like when I went out for lunch with coworkers and they started talking about like the best way to recharge your crystals, and I was like,
Oh,
Oh,
no.
like I was like, "Oh, this is different than me being like astrology, huh? I'm a Cancer. How about that?" Like, So I appreciated the fact that there was very clearly a delineation between the point of no return and the fact that it snuck up on us so slowly kind of makes you question relations with people who maybe have different thinking. And it's like, okay, they're actually having a mental break like she is, or are they just kind of a weirdo? Because for him, he was very clearly on one side of that. And there was like this little sliver of a Venn diagram between the two where they overlapped and they both thought they were on the same page. And I thought that was fascinating.
Yeah, that was so sad to watch, but just fascinating. Like, yeah, I think it was incredibly well done.
Yeah.
Like, also, don't take a first date to number one, the guy you see in your dreams house and watch him eat dinner.
Oh God, don't stalk on a first date.
Don't bring your first date to a cemetery where your mother's buried. And you want to dig her up so you can chop off her finger so you can test her DNA.
Oh my God, I know.
I mean, she was going to dig it up with like a knife, wasn't she?
Yes.
Scissors.
Or scissors or something?
Scissors, that's right.
Yeah, it was... We definitely reached the point of craziness by the
yeah, but like
up until then
it kind of sunk you into it slowly, because like she's acting a little weird. She doesn't quite have friends to hang out with her on her birthday, but she really wants them. Like,
yeah, I mean, like, I think fairly early on, it's clear that it's like an alien abduction thing too, between the like. Her waking up in like the white room and like looking around at the two people that are laying next to her, and like the lost time, and like it's just I for a while I was like, this definitely seems like alien abduction, but I'm wondering if they're gonna go somewhere else, if they're just gonna make me think it's alien abduction, make me think it's psychosis or something. But then it just turns out to be alien abduction ?
Well, so see, that's the thing, because she's not a reliable narrator.
Right.
And we're seeing everything from her perspective. So is it an alien abduction, or does she actually have, severe mental illness, like, paranoid or schizophrenia with, paranoid type? And so, because it's interesting when she's in the psychiatric hospital and her social worker is like, oh, like last time we talked about it, and she's like, what are you talking about? I've never been here. And so it's very clear she's been there before.
Right.
And yeah, so there's a lot of playing with perception, because she doesn't have a great handle, obviously, on perception and reality, which is such a trait of schizophrenia. So yeah, it's so, I think it's so sensitively and tenderly done, but in a way that kind of, the ending is so ambiguous. Like, is it an alien abduction?
It's like she's being beamed up on this ship,
right?
But like, is her being beamed up mean that she's like being dragged by somebody through the woods, or is she just laying there in the woods thinking she's being dragged? Like,
right, exactly. Like, is it happening, or is it just all in her mind?
Yes.
Yeah.
Like, is her social worker Jay Duplass, or is it actually Mark Duplass?
Which Duplass brother? Who knows?
Yes. Yes.
One part that never fully integrated for me was all the horse bits.
Yeah, it felt like a different film.
Yeah, because I mean, she really likes this one horse in particular, and it sounds like I'd be interested if you guys had a different take than me on this. It sounds like one of the reasons she had this really intense attachment to this horse in particular is because that was the horse that belonged to her friend that I think got thrown from the horse or had some sort of horse-related accident.
See,
and is
I read
now
that differently. I read that it was actually her horse. Like, she used to own the horse, but doesn't own the horse anymore, and that's why she still hangs around.
Oh, I read it as both.
Because she loves the horse still, but it's not technically her horse, but it's weird because it's like she's around and I guess she's being helpful, but it's just awkward for the people who own the horse, because they're like, that's not your... Because like Toby Huss says to her, it's not your horse anymore or something like that.
Yeah.
Right. I thought it was both. Like, yes, that was her horse at one point. That's why she's hanging around. But also she has such a fixation because of her friend who got thrown. Like, I kind of like merged.
Okay.
So I love that we all have a different take on that.
Yeah, I mean, that would make sense why she's so worried about that girl not paying attention. Because you assume that, like, maybe that's what happened with her friend, and the whole thing with, like, running water and how she found her mother dead and the running water and all that all the issues she has with that.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, but all of that is, like, logical to the point where it doesn't fit into the rest of the stuff that she's doing. Like, I mean, like, being anxious about that, I get. Like, I mean, the way she acts it out is not necessarily how anyone else would if they were of sound mind. But like, as her mania kind of ramps up, her relationship with the horse doesn't change. So I don't know, maybe if the consistency is there and that's to say something.
It's interesting.
But it's just kind of like this thing tacked on to the rest of the film.
Exactly. So it's so interesting that Dede, that you're saying that, because I read an interview. Actually, I read a couple interviews, one with Alison Brie and one with Jeff Baena, and they were two separate films starting out. Like, yeah, it's like, which is so funny. I'm like, oh, that's why. Yeah, because so Alison,
I knew it.
right? So Alison Brie has schizophrenia runs in her family. Her grandmother had it, and so she struggles with depression and mental. She herself struggles with depression and mental health issues, and so she wanted to kind of explore that family history and what that would mean, if what that would look like if you're if your own mental illness is starting to increase in a very similar
and you're seeing
way,
it happen,
right? And you're seeing it unfold, like how it happened with a family member. And then she was on a hike with Jeff Baena, and she's like talking about this film that she had this idea for a film, and he's talking about this idea of a film of someone who was like traumatized and the trauma is around a horse. And so they like are both talking, and they're like, oh, it sounds like we're doing the same film. And it's like, wait, no, what?
Not really.
Right. Those are two separate films. So yeah.
Well, no.
So yeah, so I love that Alison Brie is, kind of mining her own personal, family history and her own personal story, to channel that into this story and into this character. And I really think this is such a great performance from her. I mean, she's always fantastic in everything.
Great.
Whether it's Trudy, whether, it's Diane on BoJack, whatever she's in, she's just amazing.
Yeah.
But I really think this to me was one of her best performances I've ever seen, just because there's so many different facets to it, and there's so much empathy, for this character. I just thought it was great. But yeah, but it definitely feels like two separate films that just don't quite gel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Also, like when like when you start watching a Netflix movie, like it'll have like in the top corner, it'll say like whatever, R for blah 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 blah.
Oh,
blah.
yes.
And then like one of the things that was like graphic nudity, and I was like, what is graphic nudity? And then it happened, and the movie was like, oh, this is it. That's the part that the warning was telling me about.
When you're seeing Bush, it's graphic nudity.
Isn't it just nudity?
Yes, it should just be nudity.
Yeah, because I was like, what's graphic about this? It's full frontal nudity, but it's like she thought she was in she was in the shower at her work and then walked out into the air, like the main area where shoppers are there. I was like, okay, I guess that's graphic?
I guess. I mean, like, there's nothing violent. There's nothing sexual. Like,
does graphic equal shocking? I don't like.
I'm telling you, I think it's Bush. That's graphic. Because if it had just been tits, it would have been fine. It would have just been nudity.
Mild nudity. Half nudity.
Maybe mild nudity is just an ass. I don't know.
Side boob.
Ooh, side boob.
What if graphic nudity just meant like cartoon?
Nice.
That'd be amazing, like Roger Rabbit style. It's like she walks out, but like her nakedness is like a cartoon.
I really speaking of that scene though, I really loved it because it was so like just weird, and but it's also
uncomfortable, horrifying,
awkward. It's a common dream that people have,
right. And then like her first response is to run over and wrap herself in the fabric, and then Molly Shannon comes over to help her, and then oh my god,
it's so awkward.
And that's the same fabric that she sold that really indecisive woman that she also made her own curtains out of, and that she's wearing. It's the same color of her grandmother's dress she wears in the end. Like it's very peach.
Yes, it's very, and it's almost like a protective charm for her. That specific fabric.
I love that outfit she makes. The like curtain ninja.
Oh my god, that is great. Curtain ninja. I love it.
She fashions herself this like ninja outfit, and she's got a zipper on the back that's like the thing you use to like open and close your blinds. That's what it is.
No, that's right. That's right.
And we haven't even talked about her preoccupation with television.
Oh my god, that show Purgatory that she's obsessed with.
It's got to be like Buffy or Supernatural, right? That's basically
it
like
totally
what they're,
is like Angel, Buffy, Supernatural, all of those.
Also, I was like, where do I know the woman in that?
Oh, Robin Tunney.
I was like, Robin Tunney. Oh my god, I haven't seen her in so long.
Right?
I was
And
like, yay, Robin Tunney. All right.
I know. I'm like, I kind of just want to watch this show. I want to see what happens.
Let's see where this goes.
What happened with the clone?
Yeah.
She shot.
Which one did she shoot?
Right? I don't know. We'll never know. What is Hades going to do next? I need to know.
This is a perfect example of Evan saying, like, don't show the client the stuff you don't like. Like, we're more obsessed with that show than we are about this movie.
I know, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I want to know how that all plays out. I want to know what happens to Darren.
Oh, that's right.
I feel like every time she brings up the fact that the guy's name on the show is Darren and the guy she's dating is Darren, it's so awkward.
So
oh my
awkward.
God.
I know.
Ugh.
Yeah. I really liked that guy who played Darren, though. He was great.
He
I
was
like both
really
of them.
good.
Yeah. Both of them. You're right. Both Darrens.
But yeah, I liked the fact that he was just a nice guy and he didn't have some like creepy ulterior motive. Like when
right, because I kept waiting for that.
Yeah, and like when she goes to the cemetery and he like freaks out, he's like trying not to freak out, and she like swears at him and chases him away, so he like
with
has
scissors.
to leave. But like, yeah, I love the fact that even though he's like, there's not going to be a second date, but like I am not gonna like let this girl like be alone in a cemetery at night. Like I'm still gonna do the right thing and give her a ride home.
I know.
He went with a crazy chick to a third location on a first date. That guy deserves a medal.
I know. After she was stalking someone, I cannot stress that enough.
Take note, gentlemen. That is a true nice guy.
Right. Nothing like these fake nice guys up in here. That's right. So
Get you the one who will go to that third location on the crazy first date.
get you one who'll go to the cemetery with you and dig up a body. Except he didn't dig up the body.
Who's willing to at least see what you might be doing at the cemetery at night.
I know. Maybe there was some curiosity there. Who knows? He's like, I need to know where this third location is. But it is so awkward when he's like, no, I think we should just go home. Don't you want to go home? And she's like, no, one more, just one more.
It's like she's never been in a car before. She's so excited.
I know. By the way, this is a minor thing, but did anyone else think it was in the 80s at first when it first starts?
Oh, it has a very 80s
Right?
vibe.
Like with
between
the
the music.
And the low jack thing,
Yeah.
the not the low jack, but the bar on the steering wheel.
The club.
The club, thank
Yeah.
you. The club. I can't believe
She
I
has
couldn't
like a
think of that.
90s model Volvo.
Yes.
Like it feels
Mom jeans, the sneakers, everything.
the
yeah.
lighting even
Yes.
like some of the like lighting and outfits and
Right.
locations feel very retro.
Right, like very early 90s, late 80s, yeah. And it wasn't until I saw like an iPhone, I was like, oh, okay.
Yeah. When he
It's not just
asked
because
for her
people could.
number.
It's not just because people could support themselves on a retail salary.
Well, there is that. That is jarring. But yeah, but I also have a question, kind of a bigger, more substantive question. How do you think the film depicts mental illness? Like, do you think it does it sensitively? Do you think it does it, in a good way, in a negative? Like, I'm curious. I want to hear your guys' thoughts on that.
I feel like it sensationalizes it some.
Oh.
I mean, like for the more ludicrous elements of it, like the aliens and like the cloning and like I don't feel like that part is handled very sensitively. I feel like there are elements that are like the trauma that I was talking about, like the water and the horse, like those elements I think really speak to trauma and illness, but I feel like it's easy for me anyway watching the movie to feel like it's not treating it as sensitively as it could be. But that's just my opinion.
Yeah, I almost feel like by leaving it a question mark about like whether or not aliens and clones and all that stuff are actually real, it doesn't and almost refuses to deal with the actual severity of mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't think necessarily it was just like mentally ill people deserve to be treated well or not. Like I don't think it even takes that respect. I think it just kind of is just like maybe she isn't, and then it doesn't actually have to deal with like, okay, this is what it actually means for her life and the prospect of her future if left untreated. Like it's kind of like a spectacle that makes it interesting and makes the space to question reality.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. Like I felt like in part on one way, I'm like, okay, as I said earlier, like they're, clearly trying to put you in her shoes, clearly trying to get you to see through, through her eyes, what she's experiencing, how she has, kind of an unhinged grasp of reality and she can't differentiate. And so in that way, I want to applaud it, but I can't because, and I remember thinking this as I'm watching it, I'm like, okay, she's in a hospital. She's talking to a social worker. We only have about like 25 minutes left. That's not enough time to actually unpack this and actually explore what this actually means and what the ramifications of her mental illness actually are. And I feel like if it had done that earlier, like, after, the first half hour or so, or 45 minutes, then maybe, we could have actually gotten that depth and maybe we could have actually explored it. And then it actually would feel like it was truly exploring mental illness in a very, sensitive, humane, compassionate way. So, yeah.
I feel like Jay Duplass's scenes do kind of treat it sensitively, like from his approach as a social worker and the way that he says to her, I feel like you believe what you're saying. And like, I'm skeptical, but like, you have your truth and I can't take that away from you. Like,
right. And as someone who dates a social worker, I must say that is accurate.
Spot on.
That is spot on. You do not argue with someone's delusion. You support them and you say exactly that.
But
I did really appreciate. Oh, sorry.
No, well, I was just going to close that by saying I feel like if there was more of that potentially, then we could feel like they were treating it more sensitively. But it's just in like those kind of short spurts.
I agree. It feels like it's like speed bumps rather than the main road. Wow, I'm really going with this this road metaphor analogy.
Keep it going.
What were you going to say, Dede?
Oh, I was going to say there's one moment during that therapy session that I really appreciated when he says, like, full disclosure, I need to let you know I don't believe that. And like, I appreciate he's actually treating her like a human.
Yes.
And I think that's really important to see that. Like, the film isn't at all about her treatment, though. If anything, he's just there to illustrate how much she has bought into her delusions.
Exactly.
Or if they are delusions, which the film kind of leaves up to question, especially with that ending. But they are.
Right. Yeah. And I think that's my frustration with the film is that, like, I see what they're going for. I see why they chose that. But it's I think it ends up being ultimately an unfortunate choice. And I would have loved to have seen more of the therapy and more of kind of how she's dealing, with not being able to differentiate reality and her treatment. But anyway.
So where do we land on it? Would we say see it or don't see it?
Well, if you already have Netflix and you're looking for something to watch.
If you're playing Netflix roulette and it accidentally lands on Horse Girl, like, okay, fine, I got an hour and 44 minutes to dedicate.
See, I would say see it because I think Alison Brie is so good in it. So for me, I would say see it for that. But I would go in, maybe not expecting, the most complex exploration of mental illness. But
Sounds good.
I think for me as someone who has a distinct curiosity in complex female characters, and I like weird stuff that kind of goes off the rails. Like, I'm not against an ambiguous endings, but I do think it gets problematic when it's taking on real world issues in a problematic way.
Right, exactly. Right. An ambiguous ending in another film would have been delightful, would have been great, would have worked, perfectly. But here it's an issue.
I don't regret watching it, but I'm not sure if I would have watched it if Evan didn't text me yesterday.
Fair enough. That is quite the review.
So if Evan texts you to watch it, it's not a big problem.
I should text you more often telling you to watch things.
Right?
Oh, man. What have I signed up for?
Trouble. With a capital T. And that rhymes
It's
with
not,
P, and it stands for pool. Anyway, sorry.
I was going to say it's not infrequently that I sometimes text Dede and ask her if she's seen something to get her opinion about it.
Ooh,
That
nice.
is true.
Yeah.
That is a service I offer to anyone who has my phone number already.
Oh, yeah, I've done that too. I just realized realize that.
This is horror. I wonder if Dede's seen it. All right. Well, I think that wraps up this week's episode. So we would kind of mixed opinions on seeing Horse Girl.
I was like, Mix C?
Yes. It sounds like see Gretel and Hansel, question mark? It sounds like you're less enthusiastic
Yeah,
about it.
I don't think you need to see it, but I think there's some cool visuals. The score, I really loved the score, which I didn't talk about earlier, but that's great. It's also by the same guy who did Coralie Forget's Revenge, which I love.
Oh, such a good movie.
Such a good movie, and the score is amazing. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, I always feel bad about it. I'm like, don't see it. So yeah, I mean, I guess just see this for the visuals and the score. Go in with low expectations.
Dede, is that a thumbs up or a thumbs down from you?
Honestly, it's a thumbs down. There's better stuff out there.
Ooh,
Okay.
that is a good
Putting
point.
the stake in the ground.
There's a lot of better stuff. A lot of better stuff. I can't even talk. I'm sleepy. It's time for bed.
I would say see Incitement wherever it may be playing. And to recap from Women in Horror, there was Dead Dicks,
The Lodge.
The Lodge, and what am I missing?
Pelican Blood.
Pelican Blood.
How could you forget Pelican Blood? That sounds like a band name.
Yeah, it does sound like a band name. I'm just thinking back to that because Dede said something about like, oh, there was something deeply wrapped in metaphor, so forget about it. And I was just thinking like, yes, my small man brain should just not even think about it, not worry myself with the metaphors.
Okay. Oh, speaking of blood, the one back to Gretel and Hansel for a minute. The one thing I did like was there was menstrual blood in it. I'm always down for some menstrual blood.
I'm up for acknowledging something that a large percentage of the population goes through monthly, and for some reason we can't talk about it.
Correct. Or show it on screen. Good God, people, get it together.
Yeah.
I feel unqualified to remark on this.
Come on, Evan, be an ally.
No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Of course. I fully support it.
You can join the menstrual blood brigade. Oh my God, what is happening?
Oh my God, I'm just picturing people marching and carrying large red flags.
And tampons in the other hand or pads in the other.
Oh
I just
man.
want to say for a rare amount of time, Evan, you are outnumbered right now.
Yes, this is true. In the world of film criticism, it does not happen that often.
No. Oh, don't even get me started.
Checking my privilege.
Yay.
So anyway, yes, we've talked about some movies. You should see most of them.
We did talk about some movies.
We talked about some movies. You should see most of them. Thank you again, of course, to Dede for joining us. Always a lot of fun to have you on the show.
Yay!
We miss you dearly in Boston. We wish you were still here.
No.
But we're excited when we get the chance to see you when you fly in for a whirlwind weekend of film, I don't know, festivals or whatever
Frivolity.
else. Yeah.
And I will be at Boston Underground this year, coming up next month. So
We will see you there.
That is such a great film fest.
Mm-hmm.
it's the best. Then they're doing their Kickstarter right now. So if anyone listening wants to buy a pass or tickets ahead of time, hop on it.
Yes, that's true. Get on that. So yes, thank you again to Dede for joining us, and thank you for listening to the show. There's so many places you can find us, pretty much anywhere you can get podcasts. You can also find us at our website, which is spoilerpiece.com. We are on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. On Instagram and Twitter, we are at SpoilerPiece. We're Spoiler Piece Theater on Facebook. If you want to get in touch with us, you can send us an email. We're spoilerpiece@gmail.com, or you can give us a call
At 862-21-PEACE.
You can leave us a message, and
we love your messages.
Yeah, I mean, whether they be email, Facebook, whatever, we like hearing from you guys. So don't hesitate to reach out. Tell us what you love, what you hate, or anything in between. You can just say hi too. That's fine.
We love a good hi.
We love a good hi. Whoa, okay, that double entendre for me anyway. Anyway.
I was like, what? As someone who does not get high, I was like, what? Wait, but speaking of highs,
Yes.
the highest of highs, if you like what we do,
Yes.
be sure to rate us.
Yes, and you can rate us by going to ratethispodcast.com/spoilerpiece. We'll take you to your preferred platform for rating.
And also, if you like us, you can donate on Patreon. You can give $1. You get thanks from us. For $5 a month, you get to vote in polls.
Yep.
You get to listen to weekly bonus episodes, like this week's exclusive audio. We talked about the
Crossing Delancey.
And then for $10 a month, you get to tell us what you'd like us to watch and talk about each month.
Yes, and also this week's segment was a listener request, so it was like double.
It was a win-win.
It was a bonus and a pick. So, haha.
It's like pew pew.
So yes, head over to patreon.com/spoilerpiece, sign up, and we greatly appreciate it. So thank you for listening. My name is Evan Crean. I'm editor for The Independent. I'm co-chair of BAFCA and co-author of your 80s Movie Guide to Better Living. And you can follow me on Twitter and on Letterboxd as Real Recon.
I'm Megan Kearns. I'm a freelance film critic, editor of Bitchflix, and also a member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association. You can follow me on Twitter at OpinionSWorld and on Instagram at TheOpinionS. And Dede, do you want to tell us where to find you?
Yeah, my name is Dede Crimmins. I am a film critic in Chicago. I'm a former member of the Boston Online Film Critics Association, current member of the Chicago Films Critics Society, I think. Anyway, association. We'll figure it out. You can find me on Twitter at Dede Crim. That's DEDECRIM. I'm a regular contributor to thatshelf.com, Roomwork Magazine, and Birth Movies Death.
Excellent.
Oh, yeah. So check out all of those places, especially That Shelf. And its sexy contributors.
Sexy shelf.
Sexy shelf.
And we will see you next week.